Good morning, everybody. Well, yesterday, Justin Trudeau decided to introduce the new carbon plan, the Pan-Canadian Carbon Plan, and everybody lost their minds. Well, not lost their minds, but pointed out how stupid the plan is. So I'm going to point out how stupid the plan is because it's a stupid plan. Okay, so here is Climate Barbie. And she's not the actual climate minister. This is a parody cabinet person or just a Twitter parody account. It doesn't really matter. She says, quote, Kevin Lebon, Trudeau's unwieldy carbon plan is so much worse than just a tax via National Post. And it's a link to an article. And here's the article. But first, let's hear Justin Trudeau talk about his Pan-Canadian plan. And I'm going to stop him partway through while he's speaking because... I'm just going to interject with some questions and comments of my own because he's just awful. Okay, here we go. Oh, this interface is terrible too, so I'm hoping not to mess this up.
It will no longer be free to pollute anywhere in Canada.
I want to point out that this rebranding of carbon to pollution is disingenuous. Carbon is not a pollutant. It is you exhale carbon. Okay. Yes, the emissions from automobiles are also carbon, but cows exhale carbon, humans exhale carbon. So it is a necessary gas for life, period. So again, this is playing with language, and this is Justin Trudeau's hallmark, and it's the hallmark of our current decade. It's a very interesting decade to be a part of, but this is just another microcosm of that, playing with language, changing words. They're basically saying that carbon is pollution is carbon. It might as well be the same thing, so we'll just use pollution because people don't like carbon tax. So that's what they're doing here. So
we are going to place a price on the pollution that causes climate change,
carbon,
from coast to coast to coast. And we're also going to help Canadians adjust to this new reality.
And that means we're going to bribe you with your own money because you have to give us your money for this carbon tax, pollution tax, carbon tax, and then we'll give you some of it back, not all of it. Whereas before you would have all your money, now you have to give it to them and they'll give it back to you and only a certain amount of it, and it depends on where you live. Yay, Canada!
Spoke in the House of Commons about the urgent need to put a price on pollution.
Carbon.
And since then, many provinces and territories have risen to the challenge either by building up their own plans or choosing ours. Others have chosen not to.
I'm surprised at this point in time he doesn't launch into a tirade about how racist and terrible those provinces are and how they are un-Canadian and how they don't belong in Canada and how he wants to give them to the Islamic State. Oh, sorry, that was one too many, right? That's the one we don't talk about, right, Mr. Soros?
And so we will act. We will implement the National Climate Plan in the provinces of Ontario, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and New Brunswick. And in those 4 provinces, we will send a climate action incentive directly to Canadians to help them adjust to an economy in which pollution is no longer free.
Carbon.
Here in Ontario, a family of 4 will get $307 with their tax return this spring. That amount will more than double to $718 by 2022.
So you guys understand what's happening here. He's giving us back our own money. Previously, this would be our money that we would have in our pockets to do with as we want. Now, because Justin Trudeau is forcing a carbon tax down our throats, he's got to give money back, and he's not giving all of it back. He's giving some of it back. And the rest he's spending on incentives within the province. So this is, number 1, a bribe. Number 2, a tax. They're taking our money and then redistributing it. And that's, no, thanks, guys. Ontario soundly rejected that. So good luck running in 2019 on this carbon tax, you liar.
8 in 10 Ontario families will get back more than they pay directly. And there will be a 10% top-up for people living in small, rural, and remote communities.
So, number one about this little bit, he's saying that the $300 that they're giving back to you is in Ontario is more than you're going to pay in the carbon tax, pollution tax that they're forcing through. But the fact is, if the gas goes up, then getting goods to market price increases. And the price increases enough that consumers feel that. So not only are we paying increased prices at the gas pumps, increased prices for energy in the home because the delivery and all that other stuff will go up because that's what this is for. They want us to stop doing this, right? So stop using as much energy, stop using as much emissions. And when we do that, it's a moving goalpost, right? We've done this for years. Electricity use is the most efficient it's ever been in Ontario, and our prices are still through the roof. And they kept telling us, no, you have to use less. So we used less, and they said, well, now we're making less money, so it costs more. It defies reason. This is a moving goalpost, and they know that taxes do not impact the environment. They know Canada's impact on the worldwide emissions is 3%. Even if we zeroed out, it would matter not at all. Our country is a carbon sink. Look at the green on Google Maps. That's trees. They take in CO2. Why are we being taxed for this? Why are we being punished for this? So all of those goods, so gas stations, home heating, business heating, business energy, business products to market, shipping, it all costs more with this carbon tax. And he's trying to say, I'm going to give you $300 and then I'm going to give you $700. And that sounds like a lot of money to most people because it is a lot of money, but it's not enough when all of that money was yours. And even worse, if you happen to be in the higher middle class, make $80,000 or your family makes $80,000, so that's two $40,000 paychecks, you get to pay more. You get to pay more. It's insanity. It doesn't make any sense. It's crazy. And increasing our cost of living across the board doesn't help poor people. Giving them $300 doesn't help poor people. And guess what? If you're over 65, you don't get tax refunds. People over 65 are unequally paying more for this tax again because they're limited by their tax returns and their limited income. But everything is going to cost more. Everything. So he is lying, and he knows he's lying. And he's lying about the fact that even reducing emissions will do anything about anything.
Through this plan, we will also increase our support for small and medium-sized businesses, municipalities, universities, schools, hospitals, nonprofit organizations, and Indigenous communities. These investments will be good for the environment, create jobs, and strengthen local economies. And let me be very clear. The Government of Canada will return all of the money collected through pricing pollution back to Canadians.
But not to you.
Every nickel will be invested in Canadians in the province or territory where it was raised.
So that's wonderful. I wonder if he'll use those carbon tax prices to put the illegal immigrants up in Toronto, because they still haven't paid any money for that. Stopped hearing about that in August, didn't we? When the election went off. Interesting. John Tory reelected with 63%. But what about those illegal migrants, John Tory? It makes me very angry, everybody. Sorry. I'm not sorry. I'm pissed off. It's ridiculous. So this is a National Post article responding to this, and Kevin Libin. Sorry, Kevin, if I've got your name wrong. Trudeau's unwieldy carbon plan is so much worse than just a tax. You might call this a wealth redistribution scheme. It certainly will take money from consumers, businesses, and high-income families and reallocate it to others. Yes, that's exactly. This is communism 101, and I reject it. We didn't elect a communist government. We thought we were electing a fiscally centrist liberal. What we got was an insane communist. Anyway, back to the article. Quote, the federal Liberals were curiously still calling it the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change on Tuesday when they unveiled the details of the carbon tax they'll be imposing on any province that doesn't already have one. But that certainly gives a pretty good indication that just how detached the entire plan has come from reality. It is, after all, a stretch at this point to keep referring to it as a Pan-Canadian. The Liberals' preferred original term intended to signal that it was an agreement between the provinces, the territories, and Ottawa. Now, nearly half the provinces, part of the original negotiation 2 years ago, are rebelling against the plan to varying degrees, and still others are threatening to. So there are legal actions, and others are threatening legal action because it's not constitutional to do, well, it's not in the Canadian Charter to do what they're doing. Back to the article. And pretending this any longer has anything to do with, quote, fighting climate change, as the government continued to insist on Tuesday, takes yet more gall. It was just a couple of weeks ago that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, shredded that pretext, having declared that for a carbon tax to be effective in saving the climate from apocalyptical warming, it would have to start at least $135 a ton and maybe rise to $5,500 a ton by 2030. The Liberals' tax starts at $20 and will rise to $50. Projections currently show they won't even meet their commitments to the 2016 Paris Climate Agreement unless it's at $200 a ton, although that reality was also inverted Tuesday as the federal government policy pretended that meeting the Paris province was well underway without challenges. So they're lying, and they're lying still, and they're putting a big smiling face on lying. So, that's great. So I wanted to look for the actual report they were quoting. So here's another article talking about it. And the article also states the report pointed to a massive reduction of coal as an imperative to achieving these reductions. A substantial carbon tax of up to $5,500 per ton of carbon dioxide pollution by 2030 could buoy efforts. Now, I found the report because they linked to it in that article I was just at. I read the presser, I read the FAQs. I even looked through all of the chapters. I found some interesting things, but I didn't find the reference to the $5,500 price on carbon. I found like some interesting things, certainly, but and these PDFs take a really long time to load, so sorry about that. So on chapter 1, they talk about the sustainable development and the sustainable development goals, and I found currency being highlighted there, and so here it is. So in chapter 1, page 37, it says, and this is the sustainable development goals. It says targets also include implementing the commitment undertaken by developed country parties to the UNFCCC to the goal of mobilizing jointly $100 billion annually by 2020, and operationalizing the Green Climate Fund, as well as promoting mechanisms for raising capacity for effective climate change-related planning and management in least developed countries and small islands developing states, including focusing on women, youth, and local marginalized communities. Okay, so not only are we going to save climate, we're going to save children, youth, and marginalized people. And yet, when they bring the refugees here that the UN are sending, they're all fighting age men. So isn't that interesting? So that was chapter 1. So they're looking, I highlighted this because they're looking to mobilize $100 billion by 2020. I don't know how they're going to do that without the United States, because Canada doesn't have that kind of money. They just don't. We just don't. And I will find the next bit. This is what I did find on carbon taxes. And fair warning, like I spent about half an hour looking through all five chapters. So it's entirely possible I missed it, but I did like the search and find. So I looked up the money size, like the money chevron, the United States money symbol, carbon tax, carbon price. I couldn't find anything that said $5,500. I don't know where they're getting it from, unless they're doing some math, whatever. But I'm not saying they're lying. I just didn't see it, and that's probably my fault. I probably just missed it. But this is the other part that I saw that I thought was interesting. So this is talking about carbon pricing necessity and constraints, and it talks about how to set it up. And basically it's setting it up like Justin Trudeau is talking about up here, basically take the wealth from one aspect or one group and give it to another group. So in every country, the design of carbon pricing policy implies a balance between incentivizing low carbon behavior and mitigating the adverse distributional consequences of higher energy prices. Carbon taxes can offset these effects if their revenues are redistributed through rebates to poor households. Other options include reduction of value-added taxes for basic products or direct benefit transfers to enable poverty reduction. And then it says, ultimately, the pace of increase of carbon price would depend on the pace at which they can be embedded in a consistent set of fiscal and social policies. So they're looking at embedding these, they're looking at making these, quote, like the GST, they're trying to make it invisible, right? It's just part of the price. Sorry about your luck. And they explain why, et cetera, et cetera. And they talk about carbon pricing in this paragraph, and it's paragraph 23 or line 23 on chapter 4, page 92. So if you want to read it yourself, There's a lot of interesting information in here. It's all garbage. It's all purposely written to obfuscate and confuse. And ultimately, I'll link to my climate change video. Ultimately, it's trash. It's a way to redistribute wealth. This is all the same 2030 scheme. And actually, the 2030 scheme is mentioned in Chapter 1 of this document. And they say that we agree with it, and we want to move humanity to sustainable, whatever the 2030 doctrine is. And I likely will do a video on it. It's pretty important. And if Justin Trudeau gets in again, well, time to move, or move to Alberta, protect ourselves from the disintegration of Canada. But anyway, that's another thing altogether, I suppose. Spencer Fernando's making fun of the plan as well. He says, quote, if you walk up to someone, steal their wallet, and then give a bit of money back, that doesn't make them better off. And if someone says, hey, you shouldn't be stealing from people, you don't get to say, yeah, well, what's your plan for taking wallets? Carbon tax. Maxime Bernier is getting in on the fun. He says, quote, Nigerian scam, send me your bank account details plus a little free, and I'll transfer you $1 million. Trudeau's carbon tax scam, pay this tax, and you'll receive even larger rebates. Here's some memery. I hope I got that right. Looks like he's giving us all money, just like he promised. He has your wallet, and it's got a picture of Trudeau throwing money around, and 2 foolish Liberal voters, and Ham Sandwich, 27. He's shared his Nigerian prince meme as well in an email form. It's got Justin Trudeau dressed up as a prince, and then an email just poorly written and terrible. And Spencer Fernando has reporting on a HuffPo piece that calls Trudeau out on saying in French, quote, even if Canada stopped everything tomorrow and the other countries didn't have any solutions, it wouldn't make a big difference. Talking about climate change. So he knows. He's not an idiot. Well, he is an idiot, but he's not stupid in that he's stealing our money to redistribute it to poor people for no good reason. And here's a link to the Tout le monde en parle, which is the French language show that he said that on. And currently my VPN is in the United States, so I can't watch it. And that's about it. Sorry, this video took a lot longer to get out than I thought, and I apologize for its length. But that is the world of our imposed carbon tax and the Liberals who think they're going to get reelected after imposing a carbon tax on 4 of the very populated provinces. Thanks for watching. peoplespartyofcanada.ca. And man, I don't know if we'll make it to 2019.